The savannah was silent except for the soft, broken whimpers of a baby gorilla clinging desperately to the lifeless body of its mother. Flies circled in the heavy air, and the smell of blood still lingered. It was the aftermath of a poaching attack, brutal, senseless, and final. The mother lay still, her powerful form now only a shadow beneath the acacia trees. The tiny infant, barely 2 months old, tugged at her unmoving arm. Its small cries swallowed by the wind. Ranger Rሕrahe, who had been patrolling the reserve that morning, spotted the scene through the tall grass. Years in the wild had hardened him, but what he saw now pierced through every layer of detachment he had built. The sight of the trembling baby gorilla broke him. Its tiny frame clung to the only body it had ever known, unaware that the warmth it sought was gone forever. Rሕrahe dropped to one knee, his rifle forgotten. "Oh no," he whispered. The poachers were long gone, but their cruelty lingered in the silent grief left behind that he knew what this meant. Without a mother's constant touch and milk, the infant wouldn't survive even a single night. The nearest sanctuary was too far. The heat, dehydration, and loneliness would kill it before help could arrive. Rሕrahe felt the urgency press down on him like a weight. This was not a rescue mission. This was a race against extinction, of one small life that had already lost everything. That he looked out toward the distant hills and remembered something unusual. A lioness had recently been seen nearby, one he'd studied for weeks. She'd given birth to 3 cubs and was fiercely protective. Rሕrahe had noticed a rare gentleness in her demeanor, a maternal focus stronger than any he'd observed. A wild idea formed. Impossible, reckless, yet somehow the only option left. He hesitated, then whispered to the orphan gorilla, "You need a mother. Maybe she'll understand." Cradling the baby gently against his chest, Rሕrahe began the tense journey through the tall grass. The infant's small hands clung tightly to his uniform as if it understood this human was its only lifeline. Every rustle in the grass made him flinch. Every movement of shadow felt like judgment from the wild. When he reached the clearing near the lioness's den, he stopped, heart hammering. The lioness was resting under the shade of a fallen acacia, her golden body stretched out beside her 3 nursing cubs. Her tail flicked lazily, unaware that nature itself was about to be tested. Rሕrahe placed the baby gorilla gently on the grass about 20 meters away, its dark fur stark against the green blades. The infant whimpered once, confused. Rሕrahe retreated to a thicket, barely daring to breathe. The lioness lifted her head instantly, nostrils flaring at the unfamiliar scent. Her amber eyes locked on the small moving form. She rose slowly, her muscles rippling beneath her tawny coat, every step deliberate and soundless. The world seemed to stop breathing. Would she attack? Would she kill out of instinct? The lioness reached the trembling infant and lowered her massive head until her nose brushed its fur. She inhaled deeply, and for a heartbeat, the only sound was wind passing through the grass. Then, in a motion that defied every law of the wild, she gave a low, rumbling purr, not of hunger, but of recognition. She nudged the baby softly with her nose, then opened her jaws. Rሕrahe tensed. But instead of harm, the lioness performed a miracle. She gently picked up the baby gorilla by the scruff of its neck, the same way she carried her own cubs, and walked slowly back toward the den. Rሕrahe could hardly move. The wild had just rewritten its own rules before his eyes. Inside the den, the lioness set the baby gorilla down beside her cubs. The little primate froze, uncertain, until the lioness began grooming it with her rough tongue, the same ritual of love she gave her young. Her tongue, strong enough to strip meat from bone, moved with exquisite care across the gorilla's dark fur. The baby blinked, relaxed, and then, in a moment that seemed carved from the heart of the world itself, wrapped its tiny arms around her neck and held on. That single embrace, the fragile dark infant clinging to the golden predator, became the soul of this story. The 3 lion cubs, wide-eyed with curiosity, sniffed their new sibling and accepted it without hesitation. In the days that followed, the den became home to the most unlikely family on Earth. Ranger Rሕrahe returned often, staying at a cautious distance. What he witnessed each day defied reason. The lioness nursed the baby gorilla alongside her cubs, sharing her milk and warmth equally. The little gorilla learned to crawl, to tumble, to play, mimicking its siblings' movements. Sometimes, the sight of the four young ones tangled in sleep, two species intertwined, their tiny chests rising together, made Rሕራሄ forget the brutality that had begun this story. Scientists who later documented the event were left speechless. They debated hormones, stress responses, and possible misdirected maternal instincts. None of them could explain how the bond lasted not for hours or days, but for months. This was more than survival. It was devotion. The lioness's act became a living contradiction to the food chain, a stunning expression of compassion in a place defined by instinct and hunger, but peace in the wild never lasts forever. One scorching afternoon, Rሕrahe's radio crackled with news that chilled his blood. The poachers who had killed the gorilla's mother were back in the area. Their campfires had been spotted near the northern ridge. Rሕrahe and his team mobilized immediately, moving through the tall grass with quiet precision. He knew the den was nearby, and he knew what these men were capable of. By dusk, the danger arrived. The poachers moved toward the den's direction, rifles ready, unaware of the family they were about to confront. Inside, the lioness stirred, her ears twitching. When she caught the scent of intruders, she stood up, muscles coiling. She moved out of the den like lightning, placing herself between her four young, 3 cubs, and 1 small gorilla, and the threat approaching from the grass. The first shot cracked through the air. It missed, whistling past the trees. The lioness roared, a sound that ripped through the savannah like thunder. Then, from the shadows, more figures emerged. The rest of the pride. The lions had been watching her from a distance for weeks, respecting her space, recognizing her strange new brood. But in that moment, there was no hesitation. They joined her. A wall of gold and muscle formed around the den, each lion roaring in unison. The ground trembled under their fury. It wasn't a hunting cry. It was a declaration. "You will not touch our family." The poachers panicked. They turned and ran, crashing through the brush. But they didn't get far. Rሕrahe and his rangers, positioned nearby, moved in swiftly. In the chaos, every member of the poaching ring was captured. Justice, long overdue, was finally served. When the gunfire and shouting faded, Rሕrahe returned to the den. The pride was calm again. The lioness sat with her young, licking the baby gorilla's face as though to reassure him the danger had passed. Rሕrahe stood there silently, overcome by the sight. A predator protecting a species it should have hunted. Months passed. The baby gorilla, once fragile, grew strong under the lioness's care. But nature, kind as it had been, could not be defied forever. The time came when the young gorilla needed its own kind, to learn, to grow, to belong. With a heavy heart, Rሕrahe arranged for its transfer to a sanctuary that could provide what the lions could not. The day of separation was quiet. The lioness seemed to understand. She nuzzled the gorilla one last time, her eyes soft with something unmistakably human, sadness. The baby gorilla clung to her neck, unwilling to let go. Finally, with infinite gentleness, she eased it towards Rሕrahe and stepped back. Months later, Rሕrahe would visit the sanctuary and see the once orphaned gorilla thriving among its own species. Yet the bond it shared with its adoptive mother had never faded. Occasionally, under supervision, the grown gorilla was brought back to the reserve. Each time, the lioness appeared from the tall grass as if answering an unspoken call. Their reunions were quiet, powerful, and filled with recognition. 2 souls, forever changed by love. The photograph that captured their first embrace, the lioness licking the baby gorilla as her cubs watched, became a symbol known around the world. It wasn't just a story about nature defying itself. It was a story about love rewriting instinct in a world ruled by fear and difference. A lioness had proven something extraordinary. That compassion is the fiercest survival instinct of all. Her legacy still lives beneath the acacia trees and golden plains of Africa. A reminder that family isn't bound by blood, but by the courage to care for someone who is not like you. And somewhere in that same wild stretch of savanna, when the wind moves softly through the grass, it still carries the faint echo of a gorilla's laughter mingled with the purr of a lion, the eternal song of a love that refused to follow the rules.